Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Pfeiffer. I am an avid Final Fantasy TCG player, and I'm here right now with my good buddy Brandon Laycob. Say hi, Brandon.
Hi, Brandon.
Excellent. And Opus 12 is coming out within a few weeks, and so we kind of wanted to do a little Opus 11 recap, talk about some of the hits and misses, cards that performed the way we thought they would, maybe some that kind of underperformed a little bit. So we're just going to get right into it. I'll just mention the big four up front, the Fantastic Four, the Fab Four, whatever you want to call it, which is Braska's Final Aeon, Kadaj, March, and Ritz. I'm not going to spend much time talking about these cards because if you've been playing Opus 11 at all, you already know how strong they are. If you're a new player, go look it up. Otherwise, we're just going to move on to other cards that need a little more attention. So, starting with Fire, the first thing wanted to bring up was Cyan. Cyan was a really
Yes.
cool card. He really helped enable Samurai. Unfortunately, Samurais just kind of aren't at a point yet where they can really be competitive or do a lot. So maybe in Opus 12 with the arrival of Tenzen and another Samurai, maybe they'll become something cool. But Cyan was a really awesome enabler to at least see where it could potentially go.
Yeah, I got actually slapped around by a water fire samurai deck a couple of times,
Oh, nice.
and that deck just comes out of left field, and it does so much for samurais. It does everything it needs to, and with the release of more samurais coming out, I think we've seen three, maybe four of them. Uh, that's going to infinitely help the deck to make it basically be its own archetype finally.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope to see
Get it?
them. Hope to see him do something really good. Next card we'll move on to is Zidane, Little Fire Zidane. Zidane is one of those characters that just can't seem to get a bad card to save his life, which I mean is fine by him. And when I first saw this card, I was only thinking, oh, you're gonna have to have him with like snow or some way to get past him. But really, he's proven to be so strong on the counter swing. So like, let's say your opponent puts their forward down first, and then you know they swing and hit you for damage. You put down Zidane, swing back in, hit them for damage, and then it just blows him up with his effect. Like he's really strong.
Yeah, for just 2 CP, even though he's a little on the weaker side, having haste and being able to just pick off a forward, demanding a response just for 2 CP is pretty good.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It never feels bad if they had kill him because you're like, okay, whatever. Like go ahead, waste your power on him.
yeah, not a lot of cheap cards that'll just get rid of him for your 2 CP value. And then it'll allow you to play the other things you want without fear.
Absolutely. Brandon, you want to bring? Brandon's going to bring us into the Final Fantasy VI fire characters. We got four of them. We've got Shadow, Sabin, Dataluma, and Interceptor.
Yes, those cards were. I know Dataluma, I think, was one of the first 3 cards that was spoiled. I believe that was around Worlds. And that card just looked very strong. Two CP for 8, and having dealing you a point of damage on entry, of course, is a small price to pay for something so strong. But at the same time, doesn't really have much to back him up. Doesn't have any kind of like built-in protection or stuff like that. And being able to play him in a Golbez deck makes him very, very suitable fire card to pick out. The Sabin was also pretty good. I noticed the theme with the 6 being able to deal you damage to get better effects later on down the road. And Sabin was probably one of the better Fire 6 cards that came out of the set. Being able to basically have a built in Hecaton was
Yeah.
super nice.
Yeah, I don't think I
Uh,
read Sabin correctly when he first came out because I remember I was facing my buddy Steven the first time and he was on damage 4. He's like, go to attack phase, Sabin effect, pump him up. He's on 5. Now I'll attack in and blow you. And I was like, wait, what? That's what it does? Like, yeah, I hadn't really read what that 5th damage did.
yeah, that card was very surprising. Uh, I believe Steven also did that to me a couple of times. I was a very big fan of Fire Ice 6. Uh, Interceptor and Shadow, uh, super strong together.
Yeah.
I always forget that Interceptor doesn't just give Shadow haste. You can just basically use him as a red mage to give any of your Category 6 forwards haste. And especially in a Fire Ice 6 deck, when you have cards like Lock or Celeste,
Yeah.
just being able to also swing the turn you play them and get more value out of them. That I always forgot that.
Yeah.
I always looked at the cards and I was like, hey, Shadow's the one I want to play, being able to dig for backups that I never have and just being able to play them for free. 2 or less, of course, but that's still free. Free
Right.
backups is always.
And again, with the way he was worded, it was cool that you didn't even have to play the very backup you drew. You could draw like a snow or something, but then as long as you had the 2-drop in hand, you could just slam that down anyway. The only thing with Shadow that left me a little underwhelmed was I never got to resolve Shadow Fang, his special.
That
Either I
was a
just
good
wouldn't have a
special.
copy in hand, or like he would just die before I'd get. I don't know, but I never got to use it, so that was disappointing.
I want to say I used it once, but anytime I was like, I just want to splash a couple other shadows in there to use the special more often. And I looked, and the 3 shadows that have been printed, none of them are bad in my opinion.
Yeah,
Even the weaker one from Opus 4.
absolutely. So another fire card, and really this is kind of every single element got a card like this, is the Lilty backup. But every element got a backup that you put it down, and then you would reveal the top card of your deck until you hit one of 2 elements, and it was never the element that it was in. Lilty in particular stands out because Lilty allowed you to jam Ritz into any deck and to guaranteed find her. And when I first reviewed these cards when they came out, I really wasn't that big on them because I just didn't really see the potential, but now that I see that you can use them to tack, like, oh no, I'm going to make it so I can specifically find this one card, like, that's really strong. So I very much underestimated these on release.
Yeah, that's that very very nice cycle of cards. Because even in the fire will search for an ice wind, and then they'll just whichever backup will just search for the next 2 in the color cycle. Even in a fire ice deck, you just have Uke that also could just search the Ritz instead. Uh, I'm glad that they didn't put Lilty or whatever the fire backup would be in FFTA to make that
Yeah.
even stronger.
Oh my
It
God.
forces you to play Beastmaster as the FFTA backup, and even then, just paying 5 for the March doesn't feel bad.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Now, last fire card I'll mention, and this is one that actually I was pretty like, whoa, this is crazy strong, and really didn't end up being much, was a Kuchaspel, the backup. And I never saw it used once. I mean, I saw it in plenty of decks where he would be there for CP, but I never saw his action ability used once. However, I think that's just because Braska exists. Like, why do you need to tap a backup with this effect when you just have this crazy boss forward that just does all that anyway? So, had Braska not existed, I think maybe Kuchaspel would have been used a bit more. But because Braska on his own already pushed out Minwu and any of these forms of the protection, I think that's just what made like Kuchaspel like, oh, he's an afterthought. You don't even need him.
yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if it was just the existence of Braska or just the threat that Kuchaspel exists, forcing people out of Minwu and just not a lot of water, not a lot of protection, stuff like that. I have seen Kuchaspel in a couple of decks. I've seen it in Ninjas, uh, any of the decks that have like small amounts of ping damage to
Uh,
kill off forwards. And I've actually also seen it in WAF played recently,
hmm.
uh, with that rain being able to ping stuff off as well. Anything that has small ping like that, I've seen Kuchaspel played in, whether it belongs there or not.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen it in the decks. I never saw its action ability used. So, who knows? We'll kind of have to see if that one changes in the next opuses. Moving on to ice, we're going to start with one that I know Brandon used a lot. I actually called, I don't know what he calls this deck, but I call it his Verstale deck because it totally feels like it's ramped around Verstale.
I also call it the Verstale deck. God, that is probably one of my favorite cards from Opus 11. I know when I initially read it, I thought you only looked at the top 3 of your deck, and I was a little underwhelmed by it. But then someone played it against me, and I was like, "What do you mean it searches top 5?" And I just have a whole deck built around that with only maybe 6 cards in the deck that aren't 5 or higher.
Ooh, no wonder. I was going to say I've played Brandon. I've played against Brandon's deck a few times. I've never seen him whiff. He has always gotten 3 cards off of Verstale every single time.
I want to get max value for everything if I can.
Yeah, no, he was great. He ended up being really fun. Another big fun forward was Umaro. Again, it's still a shame they didn't release a Mog with this opus. And if Umaro had been the only 6 character released, I could have maybe understood it. But they released almost every other 6 character again. So why they left Mog out makes no sense. But anyway, that aside, I was a little worried at first about Umaro just because I was like, how strong is it really to just put something on the bottom of their deck? You know, surely it's stronger to break it or remove it from the game. But in reality, no, it's actually very strong because if anything, now it's not in the break zone. They can't recur it. I never once did I see someone like instantly search out the thing I removed. It basically was just gone. And then his ability of freezing a forward once per turn just for existing in the right situation was so strong and could just keep someone down where they're like, I can't ever get this person back up because Umaru is just freezing him. So yeah, he was great.
Yeah, I that's basically everything. I know they did print a Mog 6 last set.
Yeah, Opus 9. Yeah, the Opus 9 version.
Oh, it's Opus 9. I get 10 and 11 mixed sometimes.
Yeah, I mean that one wasn't very good either though, so we could definitely use a new Mog. I did you try the new Orphan out? Because I tried him a few times and man, like the other Orphan is just so strong. Here's the thing with this new Orphan: when he came down, his initial entry felt very strong because again, if you put him in main phase 1, he instantly put a counter on him in the attack phase. So you had 2 counters. So you only had to get him to survive 1 turn to break, whatever 2 targets you had. That felt good. However, after that, it felt so slow that you had to get him to hang around 3 turns to very slowly stack the counters up. Obviously, you could, Renoa him or things of that nature, but he's a neat idea, and I do like that he can target monsters. So if there was a monster that was giving you a particular amount of trouble, but man, he just felt very slow to me.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had a thought of putting him into a deck because of how slow it was, and just on the off chance that you play it, get 2 counters in 1 turn, and then they remove it, and you just never see another one.
Yeah. or if those forwards they had, even if you saw another Orphan, those forwards, like if they died, then there went all your counter progress. So yeah, he was just one of those cards that he just had this weird interaction with himself that he just needed very specific terms to be successful. So yeah,
it was a great idea of a card with counters, with the new counter mechanic, and maybe if we get something down the line that adds actual counters of whatever type of counter that card has, unlike the Gustalian Sid, which only does monster counters. Then it might see maybe a little bit of play.
Yeah, maybe. One that kind of let me down was Black Waltz 3, which is weird. Everything about this card reads great. He's a 2-cost forward. He's cheap. He's got 3 great break zone effects. He can get you back a summon. I believe it's a nice summon. He can make your opponent discard, or he can deal 7k to a dull forward, which if he blocks, it'll be his 3k then plus his 7k. But I don't know what it was about him. I don't know if I just had bad luck that my opponents always had an easy counter for him, or I don't know. I can't put my finger on what it was about this guy, but I thought he read so well when it started, and then by the end of it, I was just like, I don't know. I'm just not feeling this guy. Or I don't know if Ice in general just felt kind of weak this set because of, the Fab Four. But yeah, this Black Waltz, again, the more I thought about it, I was like, I almost think I'd rather have Laswell or Sid Reigns and just blast him on entry. I don't know. I don't know if it was the breaks. And yeah, I really am struggling to put my finger on it. But he reads so well, but I don't know. It just kind of let me down.
Yeah, I tried this card out, I think twice, and only once I was happy about it because it was a slower game already. So just playing such a weak card right out of the gate didn't feel too bad. He just didn't live up to expectations.
I think another thing too is with his kind of design is that I would play him early because he's cheap, but if they didn't put out a forward instead, I would want to attack with him because you want to take the free hit but then that means he can't block when in reality you want him to die. You want him to block to get his effects off. So again, it was kind of this weird well, I don't want to attack with him because I need him there to block and die, but I also have a free shot of damage, so why wouldn't I take it? So yeah, I don't know.
Ice Water, definitely, he has a home there.
Does he?
That is where searchable by Ico.
Oh, okay.
Being able to Famfrit himself in an opponent's forward and then get an additional effect on top. That was probably, out of any of the combinations, out of the 3 combinations of decks I tried with him, Ice Water was definitely where he fit the most.
That's good to know. I only ever tried him in mono ice, so that's good to know he did a little better in Ice Water. So we had Black Waltz 3. Now this is Black Mage the backup. This cute little guy was pretty neat. You could tap him, pay your summon cost and you'd break him, but then you'd get the summon to cast again. I didn't use it a whole lot, but when I did use it, it felt really good, especially if you had a Glacia or a Shiva or a Zalira, whatever you were using. Like, just to be able to reuse that very summon you just cast felt great. Again, basically for just the cost of tapping and breaking him, because then you just paid the normal summon cost on top of that. I really liked him.
Yeah. I know as soon as Opus 11 dropped, one of the first decks I built was just a nice little Ice Fire FFTA deck. Because I was like, yeah, it makes March cheaper, and I can use March and just pull back the Black Mage and use the Unai backup. So I'll just use Black Mage to cast a summon, blink the March, and March just pull back the Black Mage, so I just have
That's
summons
awesome.
forever. It didn't work how I wanted it, but it was funny.
I like the
he
idea.
He wasn't bad, just being losing a backup to that, but also having the ability to just break a backup when you need to.
Yeah.
Not bad.
True. Very true. I know a forward you and I both played a lot with that we both really liked was Lady Shiva from Final Fantasy 15, better known as Gentiana. And yeah, Gentiana, man, she's an interesting one. Again, she was always kind of like, she was one of those cards that in the right situation, she could be really brutal to your opponent, but also there were times that just kind of felt like she didn't do much, but I still really liked her. And I'm very curious to see how she'll progress in the future, because if there's ever anything that comes out that like helps her, helps enable her, I think that's just going to make her even stronger.
Yeah, she can only get better, I feel. If you have the Opus 1 Ultimisia, they just don't get their enter ability when they enter, which is always funny.
Yeah,
but
it didn't work so well, but it was hilarious.
Yeah, when it works, it's funny.
Yeah.
I know, especially with the Neo X Death coming out, having it tapped down, I don't think you'll have to sack a character at the end of your turn if she's in play. Countering that is always good, but
Yeah.
I don't see her getting worse.
Yeah, no, I think she can only get better. And three men who are already better are the Ice Remnants, which was Kadaj, Yazoo, and Laz. To me, it was almost the Kadaj Yazoo show. Like, Laz was probably the one I used the least, even though in theory, like, he buffs up the other two, so that's great. But, on two backups, it was really easy to pitch something, tap your two, play down Kadaj, you freeze one of their backups, then you search out Yazoo, and then you can just pitch a card, put down Yazoo, and then you can freeze another thing and even dull it if you have to, and then Yazoo dull freezing when he went to the break zone, and then Kadaj is in the X burst. So yeah, like everything about the Remnants was great.
I know I overlooked them when they came out because Kadaj couldn't search Kadaj.
Yeah.
And I was like, these cards are okay, I guess. And reading that Kadaj had a search effect and an on-entry effect, and whenever another remnant enters, the more I played it, the more I was like, these cards really good. Being able to just get out two forwards in a turn and then freeze two backups to set your opponent behind. I've done that so many times, and it just feels dirty.
Yeah, it really does. It's the fact that they can freeze characters, to me, is what makes them so like, if it was just forwards, I don't think it would be nearly as strong as it is. But yeah, like you said, the fact that, oh yeah, I know it's still early, but those backups you have, yeah, you're not going to use those for your next turn, so they were great.
I know Laz's passive of giving a buff to them makes Kadaj 8k, which is good. But I think his secondary effect when he goes to break zone is your opponent discards a card. Yeah, that's always not bad too.
Yeah, absolutely. Might make them think twice.
They have so many effects.
Yeah, exactly. Those cards were just like, they were the giving tree. They're just more. All right, moving on from ice to wind. You might not have seen these guys because they were hidden in the shadows, but you might have felt the wrath of their shurikens. We're going to talk about ninjas in general. The new Edge, and then also the Eblon 4, Sukanawa, Izoye, Gecko, Zangetsu, and Mena, the
Naruto,
backup searcher.
Yeah,
Naruto, yeah, Shinobi. No, ninjas were great. Like, Edge alone catapulted them into, this was a solid deck. Like, this could take some games off of people in a competitive sense. Edge was great.
Yeah.
The ability of just making and because they designed him so well, because ninjas were spread out across so many colors that they're like, okay, this guy will color fix you. He'll make them all cheaper. He didn't even have the restriction of that they couldn't become zero. So if you had the 1-drop Sukanawa in hand, you could drop Edge, put down Sukanawa. He immediately goes in like there was just so much fun stuff you could do with him. And he felt really balanced too, though. Like, again, I thought Edge was really smart in design. I really like this type of design that, yes, he is an enabler and he makes everything strong, but he himself is still very weak. So your opponent doesn't feel like, oh, they turn one edged, I've lost the game now because I'll never get rid of. No, he's still very easy to get rid of. And again, you can make them waste those shuriken counters. So yeah, that whole ninja package, the new Gecko was great. The amount of damage he could get up to on entry, like he easily hit 10k constantly. It was like 10k was like the low side of what he would hit you. Sukanawa, Izoye was probably kind of the least valuable of the four, but the Sukanawa, like I've seen my buddy, he would use the old Izoye, put that down, drop the Sukanawa. You now have like 7 ninjas on the field, so it reactivates your entire board. And then Zangetsu was such a great surprise you're dead at the end, because he dulls characters based on every ninja. So it's literally, you could have a board full of 5 people, like, that's nice, they're all dull, he's going in, boom, you lose. And then Mena, an EX burst searcher that if you didn't draw edge turn 1, you damn well were going to search him out. Like, everything about ninjas was so great, and I just hope they get better in the future.
Oh, they can only get better. The fact they got a Mena to search their ninjas as well. And as you said, Edge was already super balanced. That's everything about him. He has some very good effects, and he's just weak enough that he's not like crazy strong. Like you said, turn 1, play an Edge. Oh, okay, you just play from there. Ninjas have been popping up quite a bit in the top 4s of tournaments lately, and I love to see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I played ninjas a couple times, but just the fact that deck exists makes me happy.
Yeah, they were fun. They were genuinely fun to pilot and enjoy. Like, that's one of those decks like I don't even mind losing with, because it was so fun to see what things you could do with them.
They get that nice little backup breaker ninja as well.
Yeah,
and that exists in the deck. It's so good.
Yeah, everything about him was great. And something that helped him out even more is our next card, which is Hooded Man from Final Fantasy IV. This was one of those cards that actually, when it first came out, I wasn't really that high on it. I was just like, I mean, he was fine. Like, it was one of those, like, I read the text he had, but I didn't really understand the text he had. And shout out to my buddy Alex from Basidia Gaming. He showed me in a 4 deck just how annoying it is to have those characters reactivate, those forwards reactivate at the end of every turn. And all the Eblon 4 and Edge are all 4 characters. So again, if you play him in this deck, not only can he recur any of them on an EX burst, so he'll pull them back out of the break zone, which gets your edges back, they can all freely attack, and then they just come right back up so they can block for you as well. Like, he ended up being really, really cool. I really have turned around and love this card.
Yeah, Hooded Man, untapping all your forwards at the end phase doesn't seem so great if you don't have a bunch, but then when you start looking at what forwards exist in Category 4, you start seeing more and more. You're like, oh, hey, I can add back a Porum, or all of the ninjas, or, what was the other one? Yang Ursula in a fun little brew. Rydia, just some very good 4s that exist, and even just for that first effect to pull something back, because untapping them's that's always good. Just have blockers up, free blockers.
Yeah, he was great. I know there's a backup that Brandon really liked a lot and used. That was a new Chelinka. Why don't you tell me about it, Brandon?
Chelinka has this sweet effect that whenever it enters, it'll give your dude Brave, and it can attack twice. And you can also pay 2 win, tap herself, and bounce it back to your hand. I definitely abused that more than I should have in, I think, an Earthwind deck, targeting stuff like Opus 6 Dane, hitting 2 cards out of hand, or obviously the Broska's Final Leon, killing 2 forwards. Or even just using it as a backup, because your Norstalin will just search you an Ilaria, will just search you a backup Chelinka. So you just open the 1 backup, and in like 2 turns tops, it'll get you to 3 backups. You just have way more cards to play with. She always exists as a backup for Alhenalem, being able to just sit there and just tap itself. Hit something for 2k. I have been playing it over the forward Chelinka, mostly for the fact that it just, backups are nice. They just sit there.
Yeah.
Not a lot of backup killers.
Yeah, she was great. Everything about her was great. A new little win buddy she got too was Fiona, which just let you search out any character you wanted. And man, I remember when this card was released, we were all really worried about how strong it is. And don't get me wrong, it was strong. It didn't end up being as strong as like maybe people thought. To me, it had its best strength when you had nothing else you wanted to play, and so you just left your backups up. And it was kind of this like, okay, well, I'll leave it up in case I need to cast this summon, but if I don't need to, okay, now I'll just hit the Fiona and grab whatever I want. Or if you hit an EX burst like a Yasmat or a Barch or something that reactivated all your guys, it was like, oh, okay, well, by the way, before you pass, I'm gonna just go ahead and grab any character I want. Thanks.
Yeah. Uh, Mono Wind and Wind Water, where I've seen her the most. Um, she's a good card, being able to search any character you need. And whenever she was first announced, I saw that card and I was like, oh, and it's a Norse Talon target. This card is just insane, and I just have not seen it, unfortunately.
He was good. One that wasn't so good was Warrior of Light. Brandon, what happened with that card?
I could not tell you. I guess having just basically being a 3-for-7, just vanilla forward, prevents the next damage you would take, which is always nice, but he doesn't have back attack. So your opponent swinging in just doesn't do anything there. And his action ability for free does give something +2, maybe Brave as well. I think it's just a +2. And then if that forward were to die this turn, you just take a point of damage. He just exists to sit there and give something a 2k buff. And then if it were to die somehow, you just wouldn't take the damage, just negates that. But after that, he just 3-for-7 vanilla.
Yeah. I wasn't big on that card when it got released, but I had some people who were like, no, it'll be good. But even my buddy Steven, like, he used it in his, he had like a Zodiark Gabranth deck to, but he used the Zodiark Gabranth combo. I don't think I saw him use Warrior of Light once. Like, again, I think it might be another one of those cases of like, it's an awkward interaction. Like, Gabranth is great because at any time you can break Gabranth to prevent the damage. Whereas, like you said, this guy doesn't have back attack, so you're preventing it the turn he enters, which means he's entering on your turn. So how are you taking? Yeah, I don't know.
And the better thing about him is, even though it only prevents the damage the one time, at least he's a body, whereas the Gabranth you have to get rid of. But I don't know if that's a better trade-off, or I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Final wind card we'll mention is one of the legends that, while one wind legend went on to rule the entire set, the other one was lost to obscurity. That was Yuna. Brandon, why didn't Yuna do anything?
There's too many card name Yunas as it is. And if it doesn't do something super fantastic, it's just going to get outclassed by the backups that we already have. I know, and 5 is a hefty cost on entry just to search out 6 and upwards of 6 different colored and costed summons, which I believe you come out on top by 1 or 2 CP if you end up paying for all of that. But the fact is, then you'd have to play enough summons in the deck to mitigate that cost. Enough summons to be able to search, so you can just discard to play other stuff if you have anything left. And her special to allow you to cascade summons. By that point, you've already spent so much CP getting all those cards that you probably don't have enough left, and have to hope that she lives a turn so that you can use her special and then just start cascading summons.
Yeah, I think she just had a lot of weird text to her that just didn't really synergize with itself very well. All right, we're going to move on to Earth. Another legend we'll talk about is one that I was not very high on this person to start, but I actually ended up liking her quite a bit. I'm not sure if Brandon feels differently, and that's Ursula, the monk legend.
I'm the exact opposite, actually.
Okay, so this will be good. We'll have different opinions. I wasn't high on her at all because the idea of just like breaking your own characters to do stuff is just really isn't my play style, especially when you're breaking backups. However, getting to play with her in the right build, she could be really fun. The Earth Monk build I have really buffs up her power. It's kind of based on the YYT version of it, and that she naturally is a lot stronger through Enacro or through a Kadaj buff or just something, so that way you don't have to spend 2 monks. You don't have to spend 1 to buff her up and then another one to kill something. You can just spend the 1 to shoot something. And again, seeing some of the interactions she had, like the idea that I could block with my Yang, and then if they like try to do something on the stack to kill, it's like, oh, okay, I'll just absorb Yang and then throw him at somebody. That felt good. The way her action ability was written so that at any time you like, oh, that monk's gonna die, okay, I'll just suck it up anyway and then chuck it at you. Felt really good. Still, I won't. I'll be the first to say though that monks obviously didn't really push much past competitively, but I did think she was more fun to play than I first thought she would be, and I didn't think she'd be fun at all. But Brandon, tell me the other side of it.
Um, yeah, when she was first announced, and I saw her along with the 2-drop monk backup that we got that hit something for 3k times the number of monks you control. My deck was just focused on playing Ursula and just pulling that back every turn. Just getting a free backup, always nice. Being able to play Yang into Ursula for free into another backup was always good. Played with another Mandragora. Get a bunch of Earth characters out there. Abuse that card. That was actually my favorite card of the set. I have too many favorites. I almost never used her action ability to either buff her or hit something. Even though I did play cards such as Graviton, she was just too weak to do it. And like you said, didn't want to have to sack 2 cards just to feel like I'm getting value enough to kill one forward.
Yeah.
So everything I played basically just either buffed her to support that, but not cheaply enough, or she just existed to abuse the backup monk. And it was a real shame seeing ninjas and monks get support in the set, but not the same support. I don't want every archetype to be the exact same, but the fact that ninjas got a searcher and monks didn't, that really hurt.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, I see what you mean. Like, you don't want it all to be homogenized and that they're all the same. But at the same time, like, you know, every set probably does need a good searcher. Like, you need to have something to be able to pull her out. I had plenty of matches where I couldn't pull the Ursula, so it was just like, cool, I guess I'll just sit here with all these monk backups that aren't doing anything.
Yeah. I mean, heck, FFL got a second searcher. They got Journey. Why does a category need 2 searchers?
Yeah.
When some don't even have one.
No, you're 100% right. So my disappointment was Arden. I really love the 15 package. I like 15 as a game, and I've always liked Arden as a character. And I really love his 7-drop version. However good it is, it's just a fun card to play around. But this one, man, I had such high hopes for it. But again, I think maybe in a Opus where Broska's Final Aeon doesn't exist, he would have been better. But the problem was no one was really running straight removal that much, especially early on. There was so much damage-based stuff, and he doesn't come back from the damage-based stuff, so it just felt like that was my issue. Is as much as I tested him out, I never got to bring him back because everyone would just remove him via damage. So it's just like, okay, well, all right, I guess that's pointless. Like, his entry is still good. Like, the fact that you can make something not attack or block for basically 2 turns, that's still really strong. But again, since everything was damage based, I was like, well, I just got to go with the 7-drop because he's not going to die to that. And again, the 7-drop doesn't die to straight break either. So again, the only card this Arden is literally superior to is Famfrit or Veritas, you know, something that just straight removes like that. So yeah, he let me down a lot.
Yeah, I never touched this card. Anytime I saw a chance or anytime I would want to play him, I just played the 7-drop instead. Mostly because of the meta shift. Veritas and Famfrit just seeing less and less play. Even then, we have Black Tortoise for that. The Gilgamesh from 9.
Opus 10.
One of those 10, yes. This him existing, Arden's just kind of eh.
Yeah.
Arden having the ability to come back is always nice, but if he just never had to leave in the first place, that'd be
exactly. Yeah, you know what's better than leaving the house and coming back, never going outside in the first place.
Yeah.
Now, a 15 character who was great was the Cindy backup. I run a 15 exclusive deck, so this let me pull out anything, any of the Lightning Fords, any of the Earth ones. Yes, she was expensive, but you got 2 back right away, and her other effects were great. Like, I would often use her Brave to give Ignis Brave because he's the only way he doesn't get Brave to himself. Or even just that final push buff you can do to give everybody 3,000 for the turn. Like, she was really good. I enjoyed her a lot. And Brandon showed me. I think he uses her in his Verstale deck to just pull out. She can pull out Verstale. Like, yeah, she could grab a lot of cards that maybe you hadn't thought about because it's just a 15 forward. And there's water 15s. There are ice 15s. Gentiana, Verstale. Like, she had a lot of targets. She was really good.
Yeah, as you said, it searches for stale, which is already good enough for me. Because I never really played an exclusive 15 deck like you, so I didn't really see much value in her other effects. She was there just for stale, so yeah. And just the fact that pitching 3, even another copy of her, some dead cards you couldn't play, and just getting 2 new cards that'll just help you push the game forward, effectively making her a 2 CP, grab whatever 2 cards you want. That was too good.
Yeah, she was great. Something
Need
that
more cards like that.
Yeah, something that wasn't so great. So what there was a host of one-drop summons that were released in Opus 11. Particular, I'm going to focus on Exodus, but there were some other ones worth mentioning. I'll let Brandon do that if he wants. Exodus, man, this card is jammed to the walls with text. It looks like a Yu-Gi-Oh card. It looks like, they just printed text into, and yet I don't know, it just didn't feel that good. And I don't know if part of that was because the ice didn't feel so strong this set, so the whole like can't be dulled, like that never felt like it was relevant. So it was basically just there for a 3K Brave bump. I hit it on bursts constantly when it was never useful. I'd have dull forwards or I wouldn't have any forwards, and that's when I always hit it into burst, so it never helped there. I don't know, like a card with as much text as this one has, like, Brandon, why do you have any idea why this always felt so bad?
This cycle of summons, Exodus in particular, I don't have any real input on him by himself, but the whole cycle, getting bonus effects when your opponent's at 5, kicking them while they're down, if you don't play ahead the entire time, then it just has its own basic effect, and it's just a 1-drop +3 in Brave, which is only okay when you're just swinging it for 10K and tearing whatever down you want anyway. The not being being able to be dulled or returned to your hand is only okay because of the lack of ice. UC didn't really do much. There were other Earth summons that you'd want to play instead, stuff that would actually get you there, not just 3K buffs, something like a Kusith.
Yeah. It could probably be its whole own episode, but the concept of getting stronger when your opponent's at damage versus the Opus 10 concept of you got stronger when you took damage, the Opus 10 version has felt way better to me. And again, maybe that could be its whole own episode, but just, I don't know. Like you said, maybe it's just because it was a kick 'em while they're down card. It was like, well, I'm already winning, so how good is it that, okay, well, now I'm going to keep winning? Whereas, like, when you're taking damage, those cards felt like, okay, now I can come back in with this card because I've hit this certain amount of damage. I don't know.
Yeah, if you're already ahead, you have no problem just tossing the card. But if you're behind, then you don't want to hold on to it in hopes of getting ahead again.
Yeah, maybe that's why it just felt so weird. Do you want to mention any of the other ones, or do you want to move on?
Yeah, the only other 2 cards in the cycle that I saw that really saw any kind of play, Ifrit and Pandemonium. Ifrit was seen in like Ninjas and Waff, and I think just a random Wind Fire deck I saw, just a little bit of ping damage here and there. But the Pandemonium, I know people were freaking out about when it first came out because it's like, oh, more wind, water, board damage, and untapping backups, and it just kind of phased out.
Yeah, he's funny. I think in a different meta, he would have been even more of a terror, and I think he'll be a bigger terror in the future. Look out, Barrel Eye. But I still hate this card because I'll never forget, I was playing my 7 deck, and I had a 9K, I had a Tifa, and a Cloud, and an Aerith out. So I legit had a 9K, and she was buffing the others, an 11K, and a 7K. And my buddy, I was on 5 damage, so he went Pandemonium, reactivate, Pandemonium, reactivate, and then hit me with Pinello. So he did a 9K board wipe for the total cost of 1 CP and backups. I was just like, are you kidding me? That's ridiculous.
That's nobody. No one does that to a friend.
Right? Yeah, no friend of mine done that. Speaking of those 7 guys, so the Tifa, the Legend Tifa, I can't believe how many people were like poo-pooing on this card when it first got released. Oh, I don't know. It's not. I was like, I hate to see this thing hit the board, especially if they're at damage 3 and none of their characters can be broken. Like I'll play my YRP deck, which uses like 5-drop unit and Chaos Walker. It's like, oh, okay, now that doesn't work at all. And they all have 2K and Brave. Like that's crazy to me that Ignis gives the 15 guys 1K Brave, and Tifa's like, oh no, I'm giving them all 2K and Brave. Like, and if Cloud's out, she can just be played color fixed, no issue. So this card for me was a pain in the ass to deal with.
I know I definitely saw it more when 11 first started and the meta hadn't solved itself. And it was just, Cloud, Tifa, anything you wanted. You open the Light Cloud, you just play it for free, search the Tifa, or play it for 4, search the Tifa, and just play her for 4 with whatever. And seeing that turn 1 and not having an answer is super scary.
Yeah, you basically lost the game if you didn't have an answer quickly.
But I've definitely seen her in and out. I've seen her Ice Earth 7, which is also super strong, paired with Yazoo, and you just give, or Laws, and you just get all your remnants +4 and they're Brave.
Yeah, your Ice Kadaj is a 10K Brave now. You're just like, oh my god. Oh, it's crazy. A card that easily took the meta by storm too was Tyro, the backup. That just, man, EX Burst, search any forward you want, no restrictions, completely color fixes you, and then to top it all off, should you get to 5 damage, he'll just buff something for 5K or 2K. Like, oh man. What a card. And this was one of those cards that, like, I don't think it was in the spoilers. Like, he just showed up when the whole set got released. So no one really knew about him beforehand. And people were like, wait, what's this card? Like, man, what a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Search any forward you want. Tap for any color. Just doing that. I saw this card and just fell in love. And then so did everyone else. I've seen people just jam it turn 1, pitching 3 for it.
Yeah.
They just have no regrets. They don't feel bad about it. Just color fix for the rest of the game. Search whatever forward you want. That card, and the fact that it's an EX burst.
A burst. Ugh.
Unnecessary. Super good.
Yeah.
Only a rare.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Just a rare. And there was another rare. Was this card a hero? Tell me about Tilica, because this one was. I was wondering about this one. I tried it a few times myself. I never got it to work. Did you?
I think I've gotten it to work a couple of times, but that was about it. I know when it was first spoiled, I was freaking out because I was like, oh yeah, something that just makes all your characters cost 1 less. That's exactly what I wanted. And it's searchable by Norstalin again, probably one of my favorite searchers in the game. But unless you have 2+ cards you want to play the same turn, Tilica just doesn't feel great, and it can just be anything else. Then it would do just as much, if not more. Because then you have to pay herself to tap her, and then whatever the next card you play just pays normally, but you don't get value until card 2 or more.
Yeah.
She might see more play as we get more cards to deal with, getting more benefits. The more cards you cast in a turn, I know we're starting to see that with 12, some of those wind cards. But to make everything cheaper, just be able to play it all in a turn. But until then, it's just not too fantastic.
Yeah, she let me down for sure. You know who didn't let me down, moving on to Lightning, was the entire Kingsglaive package from 15. So we're talking Aranea, she was like basically one of the first cards spoiled and was the box topper legend.
Box topper.
Nyx, Glauca, Libertas, Crow, Luce. All of these characters were, I was excited for them because I knew I could put them in my 15 deck, but I think they exceeded expectations. Like, you know, and a lot of people, I remember when Nyx was first spoiled, and they're like, I don't know how good this is going to be. Like, we'll have to see with the other kings, but like, he feels good. He feels really good to drop him, especially if you can break the crow, get back a forward, you know, indiscriminately break one of their forwards, and the Nyx can either rush in himself or you can move a blocker out of the way. That feels great. Luce, not a whole lot of people used his effect, but just the fact that, again, he had an indiscriminate break there if you really needed it was nice. And again, he's just another Nyx target. Libertas on an EX burst can get any of these cards back, any 15 card, which is, again, made him another good Verstale target. You put him in a Verstale deck, pull back the Verstale, there's Cindy, and then if he does happen to pull back the Nyx, there's your CP back. And Aranea, on a board with even one other person, she can be a strong first strike. Like, what are you going to do? You got to deal with me. You can't get past me. And then bringing back Glauca, and Glauca was so good. You didn't even need to run the king. And I think that's this ultimately what I'm about to say is what made these guys so good, is that they had great synergy together, but you didn't have to use them together. You could just put Glauca in with a lightning deck, and he made all the lightning guys cheaper. Like, to see people like JG Fitness and Jonathan Gordon and Andy Carmona use Glauca's entry pump to bump up a Ramza so that he would get strong enough he could go. Like, that was a really cool thing I hadn't even thought of. And again, that's what just made all these cards so good, is like Aranea works with Dragoons, but you don't have to use her with Dragoons. Nyx works well with another Kingsglaive, Glauca does, Libertas, but you don't have to use them that way. So these cards were great.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. When I saw all of those, the only card I really, really liked out of all of them was the Aranea. Just being able to pull back an Urianger, to pull back another monster, Cactuar Layak, what have you. And at damage 6, giving everything haste. I thought that was really good. I always forgot about the first strike and the 1k buff she got from every forward you had. The Glauca, I had an issue with initially, the same with Tilica, but after actually playing the Glauca, that card is so strong. Playing it, for some reason, that just felt so much better. If it just lives, then that's a scary card.
Yeah, you're in trouble. Yeah.
Makes your Alua 2-drop. Makes your Libertas 4. Makes your Kane cheaper.
Yeah.
You sack it back up and then it's only a 2-drop. I definitely regretted not liking those cards in the beginning, because the more I played them, the more I fell in love with how good they actually were. Their synergy together, everything.
Yeah, they were fantastic. A card that didn't see as much play, but that I personally really liked, was the Man in Black. It's not Golbez, no matter what you think it is, it's not. And especially for Lightning, like in Mono Lightning, I really liked him because Lightning doesn't have very many big bodies, and he was a 9k on his own. And the fact that you could basically cast the summon for free if it was 3 or less. So I would use him a lot with the Opus 6 Ramu, was my favorite target. And I would either, blast one of their forwards or dull one and then give him haste or whatever effect I needed. I thought that felt great. I do understand overall people are like, well, there aren't a lot of targets. And don't get me wrong, there were situations where I didn't have a summon in the break zone, so I didn't want to play him because I was like, well, I don't want to just play him without, that entry effect, because then he's not nearly as good. But that Ramu play felt so good that I did really like this card.
Yeah, I feel the issue with him mostly was just that you already had to have the summon engraved, so you had to see it. And the summon pool for his ability just wasn't big enough.
Yeah, it was pretty much Ramu or maybe Odin.
Maybe. The only other one I would see would be Cyclops.
Yeah. A backup that I was pretty low on. I don't know what your initial opinion was. Puck. When I first read this card, I was like, I don't know. Like, it's just a 1-drop on entry, 2-drop if you get to 3 damage. But I've seen people, again, use him for very specific circumstances. I've seen Brandon used him in a Final Fantasy IX deck to bring back Vivi and Zidane. So he blows something up with the Vivi, and then Zidane goes in and kills something else. That was crazy. And then he actually really worked well in ninjas, because you got to damage 3, you could pull Edge back and your Sukanawa or, any baby ninjas or Yuffie if you had him. So I turned around on him a lot as the set went on.
The any card like that just gets you 2 free forwards is always fantastic. The problem, of course, that you had to be at damage 3. And the issue with that is that you have to hold it until you get to damage 3, which I've unfortunately had to do a couple of times. And it set me back. I'm just sitting at 4 backups just waiting to take more damage.
Yeah.
But that's another card that can only get better. Like, they're not going to stop printing 1-drops and 2-drops. The better ones that we see, I can only imagine it just getting crazier from there. It's Lightning, so it could theoretically fit into a Scion or Monster deck.
That's a good point.
Rolling back the Urianger.
Speaking of Category 9 Lightning characters, when the set started, I wasn't big on this guy, and I gotta admit, I'm not big on this guy still, and that's Kuja, the Lightning Legend. And some people love this card; they swear by it. So maybe he's just not for me. Maybe he's not my play style. Because I don't deny that he has a use, like being, but I don't know, like. Maybe I'm crazy, or again, maybe it's just not. I'm not the type. I don't really want to take damage. Like I know people always say, "Oh, damage is a resource." Yeah, I was like, yeah, but it's still a limited resource, so I'd rather not take it, indiscriminately. So but I don't know, him coming in, like when my opponent would drop a Kuja on me and break one of my guys and take a point of damage, I was like, okay, sure. Like, I don't care. So, but I know some people love this card and they like, wow, he's so great. So he hasn't moved for me, but he is worth mentioning because I know so many people did like him so much. How did you feel about him, Brandon?
Uh, I didn't understand him at first. I didn't get why he was so good, why people would play it. It makes sense now because worst case scenario, if they don't have a target, he just sits there as a body, and if you can special him, that's great. But being able to pick stuff off, like if you don't have another answer for Ritz or Ishtola being the biggest one that I've seen, people are like, yeah, if you don't play Kuja to get rid of like Aerith or Ishtola,
Yeah.
then uh, those will cause problems for you. And I get it. I understand that. I'm unfortunately it's also not my play style either. So just having a body there that kills something and deals you a point of damage doesn't feel great to me, especially as the game progresses and you just draw it later on and you're already at 4 or 5 damage.
Right.
Unless it's game winning, I'm probably passing on it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm definitely also love to hear somebody else's input on that card or any of these other cards too, because I do not play as much as I should. Travis plays more than me, which never used to be the case.
You're right.
I don't have all the insight that everyone else does. Tell me why I'm wrong, please.
Yeah,
I would love to know.
absolutely. Do you want to take us out with our final lightning card? I know you wanted to mention Anima.
I did. Anima is one of the cards that didn't seem fantastic at first. It had some funny abilities, being able to hit something for 2k for free during either player's turn. But whenever a character dies, whenever a forward dies, opponent's forward, you get to dole one of their other forwards, which also doesn't seem super strong. But in the right combination of cards, I've been seeing it more and more lately, where people will be playing the Opus 10 Sakura, or they'll just have him on board, and then it's just free damage, so you don't have to play other cards like Cactar or anything wind based. You can just play it in a mono lightning deck, ping something, play the Sakura, just draw more cards, play Orlando, kill damaged forwards, dull stuff. Because worst case scenario, it essentially makes all of your forwards 2k bigger. So all your smaller guys can block for an additional 2k and then dole a different attacker. And it's also just very good defensively for that reason.
He really messed with combat math because you'd see people like swing in with a forward and their opponent offers the trade, but instead of it just being a 1-for-1, then Anima triggers and now they dulled something. So now they've actually lost like 2 attackers basically. So yeah, it was really fun to see him mess with the math.
Yeah, that was one. I enjoyed that card. I didn't think he was going to see much play, but I have been seeing him a lot more recently in mono lightning decks, and I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, he was good. Probably the weakest element this set, or at least one of them. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm biased towards it because I like this element so much as water. And the first thing I'll mention is the Sahagan Chief and kind of these monsters in general. So we got two sets of monsters this set. One were all these monsters that you could discard from hand for an action effect, or they would just be a plain forward. I don't think I ever saw a single one of those. I thought they'd be crap. They seem to be crap, so they're not worth mentioning beyond that. But then the other one were the counter monsters, and these pretty much were exactly what I said they would be, which is that if you see them early, they're great. If you see them later, they're not as great. So Sahagan Chief I really loved. Skeleton could be a fun one in Lightning. I know Brandon will talk about Mandragora in Earth, but these were exactly what I thought they would be. Was that, again, if you can see them early in the game and then you just start building up those counters, man, it feels so good. But I had plenty of games where I would pull them like, oh, I need a desperate forward hero. Here's this monster that I can't even fully activate because I can't get the counters on him. So early, great. Later, not so great. So these guys pretty much lived up to my expectations. They were really fun. I thought Sahagin Chief, Mandragora, and Skeleton were the best, probably with Sahagin and Mandragora taking it. Go ahead, Brandon.
I would actually put Sahagin Chief third, maybe
Interesting.
even fourth, because Mandragora, no contest. That's probably the best of this cycle of monsters. Uh, Only a 2-drop at worst. You just, if you don't have the counters, you can still break a backup of 5 or more, which is just Tyro. Granted, you don't want your opponent to play another Tyro, which feels super bad. But just the fact that that can also exist by itself. Uh, Otherwise, just getting 3 characters and breaking any backup just sits there on its side. It's I thought that was great. Skeleton wasn't bad, but my favorite would probably have to be the bomb.
Yeah.
Just a 1-drop, just play more fire stuff and being able to hit anything for 10k just seemed too good. Anything for 1 that can hit stuff for 10k, or anything that can just hit for 10k, it's usually pretty good.
Brandon has certainly shown me the error of my ways in regards to the bomb.
And as you were saying about the other cycle of monsters, the mostly FFTA, I think one of them was a category 10 for some reason. I don't understand. Uh, the ones that you can discard and pay it back up and remove one. Uh, Drawing those late game doesn't feel too bad because if anything, they're just another forward. But there's usually nothing they can do that summons don't already do, but
Right.
better. Like the wind one just breaks a forward of 5 or more, which you could also just do with Diabolos or even cheaper with Alexander.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem like it was too necessary.
That's a great point. I think those ones needed a unique effect that was like, hey, if you want this effect, you got to play this monster, not, hey, do you want a crappy version of a summon? Well, this guy's for you.
Granted, they were a lot cheaper because you only needed to have 1 backup untapped to
Right.
use their effect, which makes sense removing a backup from the game, but it just never felt great.
Yeah. So we never saw that new Mira show up much. That was weird. I kind of thought that FFCC backups becoming forward thing would be a big old hit, but I don't think I ever saw anyone do that.
I don't think I did either. I was kind of crazy about it, and anytime I wanted to play it, it just never felt right. Never felt like the timing was right to do it, or she would just sit there and just die immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, she was really weak. Well, I guess that's all there's to say about her. You know who was great, which is probably one of the best water cards this set, was the backup Alchemist. 2-drop water backup that you could just turn any type of card in your hand into any other card of your type. And I remember when I read that, I was like, that sounds solid, but it wasn't until I played with it that I was like, wow, this is really good. Like, I would put it in my Warrior of Light deck just to guarantee I could pull out Cosmos. So that when I had extra backups, be like, nope, let me switch this out, get that Cosmos. There were many times it was like, I need this key forward. I've got this junk forward in my hand. I'll swap them out. Key summon. Yeah, he ended up being great. I can't imagine not using him right now.
Yeah, I also did not enjoy it when I first read it. I was like, why would I waste a backup and discard a card from hand, such as another backup, just to search another backup that I could play when I could just play different backups? But actually playing the card, I initially slapped it into a Water Fire FFTA deck just to help make March cheaper. And the more I played that card, the more I realized that is probably some of the best utility in Water I have probably seen. Especially just being able to pitch your Ritz and search for a March. That never felt so good.
Yeah, that was great. Why don't you talk about your girl Realm? I know I loved her. I know how much you loved her.
I know you said Alchemist was probably the best water card, but I will have to disagree because I do feel that Realm is better than Alchemist.
No, that is a worthy fight right there.
Realm, like I said, being able to get 2 characters for free off of 1 card is always very good, especially when you get them out of your deck. So it's not something you have to have seen already. Makes it even better. Unfortunately, they are monsters, but also not unfortunate because monsters are pretty good. You could grab a whole range of them, Saganashi or Cactar, depending on the deck, which I have seen in a Wind Lightning deck, because they have that cycle of backups that can just help you dig for the realm. I've seen it in Earth decks, being able to grab the Mandragora and another 1-drop Earth. And the best part about that is if you play 2 monsters of the same element and one gets a monster counter, it sees the other one enter at the same time, so it'll get a counter immediately. The one part about Realm is I always forget the second effect. If you have 5 or more monsters, you just get to bounce
Right?
forward. I've used that more than I expected. I've passed turns forgetting I have 7 monsters in play and just not thinking about it.
Yeah, no argument for me, man. She was fantastic. She felt great to use. Someone who didn't feel great to use. This was a card I wasn't really sure on. I wasn't really high on at the start of the set. And after using her, I have to say I'm about in the same place, and that's Amo, the backup. Again, like this card is so close on potential because the idea of redirecting an action ability or an auto ability is so strong as a concept, but it had to have a valid target, so that eliminate, like, you couldn't, man, if you could have redirected Broska's attack back to himself, that would have been awesome, or to one of their forwards. But again, it had to be a forward you controlled, so because it had to have a valid target, there was a lot of stuff that it just didn't work with this. And again, she also, to me, she felt a little pricey because I think it was like, what, 2 water, or at least a water and a colorless, and you had to tap
1
and
and a
break
water.
her.
Yeah.
Which meant you were most likely then leaving her up, to try to do so. Now, don't get me wrong, there were still a few times it was like, "Ooh, I'm going to redirect that attack," and that felt really good. But overall, it still just always felt like, for me, a bit more work than the reward that it granted you.
Yeah, it's I love the effect of the card. I just wish it didn't cost so much to redirect. And the fact that most things only say targets your opponent's cards really hurt it coming out at this time. It's one that could definitely see play in the future as we get more stuff that targets. And I also do like about it, though, that it doesn't have to just redirect an effect that targets a card on the field.
Yeah.
It could target something from the grave too. I've never done it, but I've always wanted to just redirect a March target to a Beastmaster or something.
Right? Yeah, yeah. It's never happened, but man, that would be fun. The Celis legend that came out, she was solid. I wasn't really big on her, and then I saw people. If you didn't have an answer, I got into a couple matches where my opponent would just every turn just keep bouncing my forward back to my hand and just kept going in for free damage. And it was just like, oh wow, this is a bigger pain than I thought it would be. So Celis actually outperformed my expectations a little bit.
Yeah, if you don't have an answer to her right away, it's one that could snowball out of control, and especially you deal a point of damage and draw a card, because at first you're like, well, I don't want her to bounce my forward, so I'll just play it safe and just build up backups. But then she could just change it up and say draw a card instead.
Yeah.
I know she is also one that I experimented with as a Chelinka target,
Nice.
being able to bounce forwards and draw cards. But other than that, probably wouldn't just play her over the ice one.
Yeah, yeah. She was. I didn't think she was fantastic, but she did outperform what I thought she would. For our last little water portion here, Brandon, why don't you tell me about the Summoners kind of set, the Garnet, Ico, Unaleska, that whole crew?
Summoners were interesting, but unfortunately, they just got almost nothing. They did get a Summoner Searcher, which was great, but their Summoners are just spread out through different colors. You have Earth Summoners and Ice Summoners and Wind and Water that you're basically locked into Water X, which obviously, as the format develops, you can just basically splash whatever color you want to in any deck. But the summoners that we did get, Garnet and Una and Unaleska, just didn't do much. It didn't do anything. Garnet slaps counters on her when you play summons, and you can remove them and make stuff stronger, but that requires you to have Garnet and a bunch of summons.
Yeah.
And the Unaleska makes your summons one less cheaper for each summoner you control, but that's the same situation where you need summoners and summons. And it just didn't feel like they did enough as a whole.
I'll never understand. Sorry, not to cut you off there. I'll never understand Unaleska's effect either. That like, what she like pulled a summon back to put it on the bottom of your deck. Like, how is that helpful? Like, when we have cards that already put something on the top of your deck, it seems so weird to be like, no, this one's going to the bottom. Like, And yeah, again, okay, so then the theory is like, well, then you could search it out again. Okay, so now I have to do another step to get that card back. Like, I don't know, that just felt so weird to me.
Yeah, I always enjoyed that, being able to put stuff back into the deck, especially from the grave, whether it was a summon or not. I enjoyed that aspect of it. I just never really found it useful enough. Uh, yeah, I feel like the summoner support this set was actually worse than the monks. Just saying a lot because
Right?
they actually got a summoner searcher.
Well, it's funny
Oh,
that like Braska's is technically tied to the summoners, but I mean, I'm sorry, he could not have that text on him, and it wouldn't change anything about. Like nobody used him for that. Like why do that when you could just slam down Braska's, and now you've got this master monster of a forward to deal with.
any instance where I could have discarded him as just a free 10k to anything, I was like, I'd rather just play this card to the field.
Right.
It just does so much more that way.
Because he'll still get that 10K off when they try to get rid of him, and then yeah, 100%. All right, we're gonna wrap up here with Light and Dark. We'll mention every card in Light and Dark except for Kadaj. Again, you could look anywhere to find out how incredible he is. Starting with the Light Cloud, this was a card that a lot of people were down on, especially because after he was revealed after the Dark Sephiroth. However, my opinion on this guy did quickly change as soon as I saw him. Especially being on the losing end of many turn one Cloud into Tifa into, hey, I win the game. Have fun. GG, go next. Yeah, he was great. His break effect, I was totally wrong about that. I was like, oh, that's too pricey to have to pitch 7 cards from your deck. No, it's not. If they only have one forward, and it means you just keep swinging in and kill them. Yeah, everything about Cloud was great, and I was 100% wrong about him.
Yeah, that was like you said, it was spoiled after the Dark Sephiroth, which just didn't seem as great. But being able to search the Tifa turn one and play the Tifa turn one, and every turn after that, you got to play forwards to keep up with that, and just for free, essentially remove 7 from the deck and just kill a forward. That effect was way stronger than I had took uh, initially thought,
Yeah,
because you don't have to pay CP for that.
yeah.
That's very strong.
Yeah. Well, it did cost you 3 CP, but again,
Was it the 3?
yeah,
Okay,
but
I couldn't
it was
remember.
still it didn't feel like it was a big debt to pay like I thought it would be. Speaking of Sephiroth, he's our next one. Everyone was freaking out about this card when he came out, and I really think the reason Sephiroth was very good. He's still a very good card, and he saw play, but he didn't see as much play as people I think anticipated. But I honestly think that's a bigger referendum on Kadaj than it is on Sephiroth, because the thing with Sephiroth is he correctly, wisely has a leash on his abilities. He can't be played to the field until at least one person is on 4 CP. So, on the offhand chance you saw him early in the game, it was a dead card. You literally just had to hold this card into your hand until he could be played. Again, compared to something like Kadaj, where you could slam that down turn one and then he was going to survive for however long it took them to get rid of him. So I really think the reason you didn't see Sephiroth as much was just because of Kadaj. But even then, when he did come down, he was still, he's a 10k body, which is very difficult to get over. He's only a 4 cost, and he just broke anything. Literally, it's like, hey, what's the most problematic thing on their board? Yeah, get rid of it. And God help you if he ever got to Octaslash you, because you lost the game. I never saw someone take an Octaslash and then win, especially because of the way that special worked. It just required a special. He didn't have to dull. So if you put them to 5 and you were on 5 and they had it in hand, your ass was getting Octaslashed. You could not avoid it.
Yeah, that's the thing everybody's talking about, power creep. It's a 4-drop 10k, but he had the restriction, like you said, someone has to be at 4 damage in order for him to see play hit the field, and just break anything. But the meta just he didn't fit. Dodge can remove stuff from the grave, which is very problematic.
Yeah.
The Sephiroth just killed something, which was always okay.
Yeah. Agreed. Probably my favorite of the light and dark cards that got released was the starter Aerith. Again, she's the type of card design I love, is that she's basically free. If you play her in a 7 deck, she will pull back the very 2 cards you pitch to put her down. And then she had 2 great action abilities to send her out on if you had to. And again, she herself wasn't very strong, so she just felt like an enabler for the other 7 characters, not that, oh my god, Aerith hit the field, what are we going to do? Like, I got to answer her. She was just a nice enabler for you, so I really liked Aerith. She was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Aerith's entries effect to add 2 7s back was pretty good. And the fact that she had additional effects on top of that was pretty nice. I don't recall really using them, but the fact that they're there and you have an option to just break a dark character forward, or protect one of your other forwards from being broken was always nice. You had to get rid of her, unfortunately, but
Right.
it's all right. And then if you got a chance to play her for free with a Devout or Starter Cloud's effect,
Right.
just insanely free value.
Yeah, she felt great. The backup Chaos, the dark backup Chaos. I was a little worried about him. I was 100% right. Some people were like, "Oh, his action ability is that good," and like the fact that his action ability, you can just remove a character from the game, and that can go into any deck. That was so strong. Honestly, I would see people use that more than they would his entry effect. I saw plenty of times he would get slammed down, and they wouldn't do the entry. They're like, "Nah, I'm not paying for that. He's just there so I can remove something later." So yeah, he ended up being just as good as I thought he would be.
Yeah, that was I I love that card. Also, having the ability to pull anything 5 or higher back from the grave was grave recursion is always good, but then also being able to just remove a character, just not even break, just remove, always
Yeah.
super good. And when I first saw him, my initial thought was Shadow, pulling back Shadow and Shadow to dig for another chaos. But it's been popping up a lot more in the Sid 2 Windfire decks, along with upcoming card,
Yeah,
Princess Sarah.
Princess Sarah. Brandon might have to try to sell me on this one a bit more because I wasn't super hype on her when she came out. And other than the Sid 2 grab a one cost backup, I do see the kind of the joy in that of, oh, I put down a light forward, now it's no longer a light backup. And then you can put down a dark guy. So, haha, I technically have a dark and light on the field at the same time, even though, obviously, technically you don't. But beyond that, I just never saw anyone really use her tap effect that much, which, unless you just want that Sid 2 cheap one cost search, like, unless you're doing that, I don't know why you would slot this in randomly. Like, oh, I'll just put a Sarah in a deck. I don't know. How do you feel about her?
Other than in Sid 2, I do like the card, mostly because it's just a free color fixer and it doesn't have to be light. Uh, if you could slap it in a mono deck and it's just a 1-drop backup that can also act as another anthem to just buff all your forwards.
That's a good point.
You could slap it in a dual color deck, or if you just have like a fire wind deck, if you just want to use her, make herself wind, you can just pay a fire for it. Then if you just draw Ritz or whatever later on, just the fact that it can color fix anything, mono or dual, is just nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, that's our thoughts on Opus 11. As unless you've been living in a cave in the mountains somewhere, you'll know that, COVID-19's been going on. So unfortunately, most of the Opus 11 meta was basically crippled by this virus, and we weren't having any official tournaments. So this is such a strange opus for me because I'll be honest, I kind of hate it. I really hated this opus. One, because I loved Opus 10 so much. Two, because I felt there was so much power creep in this set. And three, because, it was dominated by Kadaj, BFA, March, Ritz. However, I can fully admit that this will always be the I wonder kind of opus, because maybe had I gotten to actually play people in person at my locals, all that stuff wouldn't have seemed as bad. But again, just playing it on Octagon over and over again, you don't get that in-person camaraderie you get with your fellow players. That just made me feel even more detached. So maybe this is an opus I would have liked more had I gotten to play it in person and had not all this awful stuff been going on. But unfortunately, we'll never know. So I can only, kind of judge it based on how I do feel about it and what did actually happen. And that there were some really cool cards here. There was some stuff I did really enjoy. The 4 just kind of dominating everything really did put a sour taste in my mouth. So hopefully things will get back to normal, because I would like to play in person again. Brandon, how did you feel about it? Like you said, Brandon normally would never ever play less than I did, but because of all these circumstances, I know he did. How do you see the opus as a whole when you look back on it?
I am glad that it took a while for it to shape up, because I know at the start I didn't really see that much, if any, March Ritz or Kadaj. It was mostly just BFA, and it was a lot easier to deal with. But as time went on and the deck started shaping up more and more, we got to see a lot of different decks, especially now towards the end. And another reason it could have just been so stale is because we've had the same set for 7 months,
Yeah.
the same meta for 7 months. Uh, Hopefully that does not happen with Opus 12.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I
same
know,
thing. Opus 12 was supposed to come out in July, so maybe if that had happened, this wouldn't have seemed like such a downer because, yeah, it would have been your typical 3 to 4 month cycle or whatever. But yeah, this going on for as long as it did was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of seeing these cards everywhere.
yeah, and I know our locals is usually a lot more casual, so it wouldn't be too much of the same stuff over and over. A lot more fresher ideas, just a lot of different decks, uh, and the fact that a bunch of our local players just kind of fell off the face of the earth because of this whole thing. No
Yeah.
one wants to play online; they'd rather just play in person. Just kind of kills the mood.
Yeah, it really does. And again, it's a sucks because it's like I get it. I get why they don't want to play online, but unfortunately, that was all we had access to at this point. So, either way, hopefully, we're on to bigger and better things. Opus 12 is coming out rather soon. Brandon, thank you so much for jumping on with me and doing this little Opus 11 recap. It was nice to kind of look back over the set.
You're welcome. Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely, ladies and gentlemen, have a good evening, and we will see you in Opus 12.